so I don't forget. Okay, we're good to go. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Chicago IANDS. And this is Diane Willis. I'm here in Chicago, and we usually start our meetings with a brief meditation with my Native American flute, because I did that once and people said that's a good way to start. So let's just take a minute and change the energy and get us all connected. And if you have things on your lap, you might want to set them aside and get yourself in a comfortable position. So
should we mute everyone, Diane?
I don't know. If you're going to make noise, mute yourself. Otherwise, just listen. So you allow yourself to relax, and on your some people like to start at the feet and go up, or at the head and go down. Doesn't matter, whatever works best for you. And allow your eyes to gently close, and allow yourself to go where you go when you go. Welcome back, everybody. Hard to come back. It's so good to see you all today. Such a beautiful day. And we're really happy to have this going. My internet is not too stable, but hopefully it's going to hold up for the next 2 hours. In any case, a brief announcement. And that is that our speaker next month is going to be Bruce Grayson. Bruce was one of the founders of IANDS back in the 80s, and he is one of the world's leading researchers for near-death experiences. And he has many, 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 many stories, and they're all wonderful. He's spoken for us before, once or twice, I'm not sure, maybe twice. But he always has something new and fabulous to relate. And on top of everything, he's just written a new book called After. And I've ordered it. Haven't had it yet, but I've been reading about it and hearing about it. And Tricia told me too that she has enjoyed it very much. So I think everybody would enjoy it. It might make a good Christmas present if you buy soon, so we don't run out. And in any case, today we have with us Tricia Barker, and I'm just so thrilled to have her. I've been wanting her to come for so long, and it's took a while to things happen in their own time, and this was the right time. So we are thrilled to have her today. She had a near-death experience when she was a senior in college, and it was life-changing, as most of them are. And she wrote a wonderful book about it called Angels in the OR. And that's another good book that you can put on your list for Christmas shopping. And I'm not going to tell you a lot about her because I'm going to let her tell you about her. And so please feel a warm welcome for our speaker, Tricia Barker. Thank you, from Fort Worth, Texas. Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane, and thank you for hosting such a wonderful group. One thing I love about IANDS is that it allows people to share their spiritual experiences. And not everyone has had a near-death experience, but I found that most people who follow them have had some sort of awakening or some type of experience that's like relatable to near-death experiences, or they found near-death experiences because they were trying to figure out why they had this moment of oneness or this moment of, you know, ecstatic joy and union with their creator, or that they talked to someone in the afterlife. So I love IANDS, and it was great to be a part of the conference this last summer. And my talk this time was about spiritual community, because I think that is so important, you know, that we are together in spiritual community, that we are supporting one another on each other's journeys. And it means a lot to me. So thank you for having me. And if you're not familiar with my story, I know it's out there. It's pretty widely publicized. You know, I've been on Dr. Oz, National Geographic magazine profiled several near-death experiencers, and David Bennett was one of them. You know, Coast to Coast AM has interviewed me. So like, really, I feel like I've kind of touched on most of the networks, and, you know, I've put it out there enough. What has been the joy has been connecting with other experiencers. So if you've heard my story before, I want you to just connect with the energy of it, because I've interviewed many people who have heard their story before, but I just let the energy of that afterlife really transport me when I listen to them. And then many times in meditation afterwards, I get a piece of their experience. So if you haven't heard my experience, I'll just begin with that experience. And if you have, then really just pick up on the energy and what you can personally gain in the sense of healing or in the sense of connection for yourself. That's what I always hope for, is that these stories connect you deeper on your journey and your path. But I'm just going to be very real with you. I was 22 and a senior at the University of Texas at Austin, and I grew up in the South. So I was raised in a very religious, judgmental, abusive family. And the judgment was the worst part. And I remember turning against Christianity and against all religion at about 7th grade. And I thought, look at my mom and look at my dad. What has this religion done for them? You know, I'm going to use my brain. I'm going to get a great job. I'm going to be a materialist. I'm going to succeed. And this will wash away, you know, that imprint of poverty from me. And that will be, you know, what makes me feel good about myself. And so that was the state I was in. But I was also incredibly emotionally wounded, because my entire childhood, no one had ever seen me, you know, like my feelings were never validated. They were never okay to be expressed. My mother was highly physically and emotionally abusive, and there was a lot of neglect, really. So, you know, medical neglect, food neglect, you know, just, it was a pretty rough upbringing. So to me, the answer was, be rich, be this person who gets yourself through life, and you will be okay. So I went to college and, dealing with emotional issues, but I had the hope to be a lawyer, to go to law school at UT after, taking some time off to travel. And it was my senior year. And I didn't put this in the book because the editor said to take this out, but I was at a comedy club, and I'm going to tell you guys what happened. It was a premonition before my near-death experience. I was at this comedy club, and I felt my spirit lift up out of my body, and I heard a very strong statement: "You are going to die." And I just remember going, soon? Oh my God, what is this? Did I have a psychotic break? Because I was agnostic at the time. I thought, oh, this is terrible. So I quit all, smoking pot, drinking, I just started running, and I was like, I'm going to get my health back. What's happening to my brain? This is terrible. And I just ran every day, 8 miles. There's a loop in Austin, Texas around the town lake. And I would just run faster and faster and faster. And running was like my connection to what I did well in high school, and it brought back health, and it brought back this strength to my body. And on the day of the race, I got up and I was really excited. This is the first 10K I participated in, and it's a big deal in Austin. Austin 10K is, the capital 10, and just, people from all over the world come to compete. And so I got up super early, and I had had bad dreams all night long. I heard my dad screaming down this tunnel in my dream saying, "Watch out, watch out." And then I heard, my mom screaming, and she was saying, "Oh my God, no, I can't believe this happened." And so I woke up and I thought, this is really strange. Like, I didn't get any sleep. I've got to get to this race. As I was driving my car, I didn't stop for coffee. And I remember that first light turning yellow, and it's a weird intersection, Guadalupe and Lamar in Austin, and they've changed the intersection a little bit. I'll come back to that, but it curves, and there's one light and then another. And so I was gunning it through that yellow light, which is the first one, assuming that the next light would be yellow. It turned red right as I was crossing under it, but I'm pretty sure that the guy who was going about 60 miles an hour as well probably was, jumping the gun and just didn't see me. So we hit each other almost at a head-on collision, but kind of, in between a head-on collision and a T-bone. He was in a very large car. I was in a Honda Civic from the 80s, those hatchbacks. I don't know if you remember those, that were just little crumply things. I looked up later, wrecks at 65, 70 miles an hour, and they say instant death. Well, I wasn't dead, but I was really messed up. And I remember, like, I was slumped over on my window, and I could not reach my glove box to get my license or registration or any of that. And I knew that was going to be needed when the police got there. And I couldn't, I was like, my whole body just felt hot, and like I had just lost, the ability to be straight. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know exactly what was wrong. I just knew, ooh, this is bad. And I remember the cars that passed us, and this is why I always stop for people if I'm the first person on the scene, and I actually have been several times. But I saw one group pass, and it looked like they were going to church. The guy was like older in this light yellow Mercedes, and I'll never forget it because they didn't stop. And then a group of teenagers saw us, and by that time, the man who was behind the wheel came out, and he was able to stand, but his windshield had broken and he was bleeding. So there was just blood, gushing down his face. So he looked gruesome. And this group of teenagers squealed their brakes, looked at him, screamed, and then drove off. And this is, 1994, before cell phones. So someone would have picked up the cell phone, I'm sure, now. And I don't know if these people called later, but, there was another person who just drove by like nothing had happened. And I thought, I need to get to the hospital. Is someone stopping here? Like, what's going to happen? Well, I think the angels were already helping, because a nurse stopped, and she jumped in my car, and she was like, "You need to not move. You're in bad shape. Like, don't move." And she just held my hand. And I get a little emotional thinking about the kindness of strangers, because You know, when people do that, it's kindness that helps people through trauma. And I just remember her boyfriend running to the 7-Eleven, calling for an ambulance. And then that was the longest day of my life until the near-death experience. But I didn't have health insurance. And so I waited 17 hours in the ER, a very long time. And I, you know, I didn't know. I'd never known anyone who'd broken their back, but I learned pretty early on. There was an MRI, and the nurse said, "Yeah, you've shattered 3 vertebrae, and you know, you have a lot of internal injuries as well. So, you know, we can't give you anything for the pain because a neurosurgeon needs to take care of the back first, and they need to okay it, and you need to wait until they say it's okay for us to administer pain medicine." So it became, you know, more uncomfortable as the hours went on, you know, just that pain in the body. And all I could think about was the material world. So I'm trying to paint a picture of who I was. I was, you know, I advocated for myself, but I was someone who was only thinking about, okay, do I have to drop my classes? Am I going to walk? Is my car totaled? You know, what's my roommate thinking? Like, you know, I need to connect with some friends, you know, like what is going to become of me. And walking was the major thing. I just could not picture a future without walking and running. And so I constantly asked nurses about this, and they said they could not tell me. But one nurse was kind enough to say, yes, some people with back injuries do walk afterwards. You know, it's not the end of the world. You know, I was in shock. And then my family members started showing up, and they weren't too happy with me by the time they got there, because I overheard a neurosurgeon talking to some nurses, and he was on the phone, and he declined to take my case because I didn't have health insurance. And so they were talking about it, you know, and I overheard this, and I was so angry. I was like, here I am trying to pull myself out of this world that I grew up in, and I'm just a piece of flesh, just throwaway to people. You know, I was pissed. I was angry. And so I started screaming at him. And then, you know, I just raged about my whole life. And then eventually I just felt sorry for myself and was crying for hours. And then I had nothing left. And this neurosurgeon came by, and her name was Dr. Laura Flan. And I remember thinking, oh, cool, woman. You know, she's this, you know, in her 30s, and she just looked like she loved her job, but she had been on duty for 40 hours. And so she said, I can't operate on you right now. So I need to take a nap, get some dinner, and I'll come back and I'll do it. And I was like, finally, you know, someone cares enough to actually do this operation. So then I just rested and waited and wondered, you know, what life would be like. But I kind of gave myself over to surrender. You know, like there's a point where, you know, you try to control so much, and a moment like that really forces you to just go, okay, this is not in my hands. This is in the doctor's hands. This is in, you know, the staff. There's nothing I can do. And then it all happened very quickly. You know, the anesthesiologist came in and put, you know, whatever it is they put around you and said, count down. And I counted down to 98, and then I was out. The next thing that I knew, and you know, it's still to this day when I think about it, I just get so excited. Even though it's kind of gruesome, you know, the vision of seeing one's body, I lifted up out of surgery, and they must have been working on me for quite some time, because there was a lot of blood at my back. There's a scar down most of my back, and they opened up my hip to take bone from the hip at that time. So I was somewhere floating above the ceiling, you know, or at the corner of the ceiling, looking down at the doctors and looking at my body. And I knew it was me. And I just remember the first thought was, wow, surgery is way more gruesome and bloody than I thought. And then the second, we go on, really do. Like our spirit form goes on. And I remember feeling so clear, like as if all that fog, being me, had been lifted. And I just understood this dimension immediately. And I was looking at the doctors, and then behind them, I saw these light beings. I call them angels because that's more relatable to most people, but they were just highly intelligent, amazing light beings that were just composed of light. And I'm an English teacher, so I've workshopped this part of my book a lot, and it has been so hard to describe the supernatural imposed over the physical world. And so I've said in so many workshops, this is just kind of a side note where people are like, what do you mean? Their eyes shone with light. Were they like lasers? And I remember thinking, no, not lasers. It's hard to describe, but the angels spoke with telepathy, and they sent healing, and they sent messages. And if this was all, just instant into my spirit form. And then at some point, they really playfully said, watch this. And they sent this light through the doctor's hands, through their backs, through their hands, and it lit up my entire spine. And it was like energetically, I understood that the operation would be successful, that I'd walk, that I'd run, that I had this life beyond this moment in time. And I remember relaxing into this, and I almost felt like there was so much information that they were giving me in that moment, downloads now that you might say, that I wouldn't be able to process for some time, that it was just this moment that they were working with me. And as I saw the angels do this with the doctors, I thought, well, isn't that odd? That is just so bizarre. These brilliant neurosurgeons have no idea that angels are assisting them. I'm going to tell them when I come out of surgery. And that was like, one of my thoughts. And I thought they might not be open to the idea, but I thought how amazing if surgeons were, if people knew that this was possible, that angels could literally work through us to assist with healing, to assist with things. So that moment just was, life-changing alone. And I remember also thinking, I could go back into my body right now, and I'm certain I could convince all my agnostic friends that we go on, because that certainty out there was just didn't feel like a dream. It felt like this life was theater, and there was a reality beyond this one. It was like seeing beyond the curtain. It wasn't really like, I'm making up these angels that are working. It was like, oh no, that's my body, and that's what's playing on the radio, and this is what's happening with the surgeons. Well, as soon as they did that, my heart flatlined. So as soon as the angels sent that light, I knew I was dead, and I was like, ooh, I don't want to watch that. There's already too much blood. I think I'll leave the room. So I left the room, and spirit form, you think an intention follows it. So I went through the wall quickly, and then I was in the corridor, and I saw my stepdad, who I really had only met a handful of times. My mom married a younger man when she left my dad, and she didn't tell him about her older daughter. And so I just met him a couple of times, and we hadn't really, formed any kind of, friendship or anything. And I remember thinking, well, I hope they have a happy relationship. I hope, all is well. And then I found it amusing that he was eating a candy bar, because he's one of those types of people who will tell people that they're going to get diabetes if they drink a Coke, or, just like criticize people's eating habits. And so I remember thinking, that's funny. And researchers love that part of my story, because, anything that you see that's verifiable proves that consciousness continues on after death. And I later verified that moment. But to me, what's important is that when he walked into that room, and I didn't see this part, I heard from my mother later that my dad showed up right at that moment. And when they saw each other, they hadn't seen each other since divorce, because they divorced when I was in college, and then she married him when I was in college. And he just looked at her, and they both had this overwhelming feeling that I had died. They fell to their knees and they started praying. To me, that's more significant, because I believe we're psychically bonded to people we love, people in our family, and especially parents and children. That knowing of the moment of death seems to me important. So, I saw my stepdad get this candy bar. Then I left the hospital, because the hospital wasn't very interesting, and I wanted to fly. And I was flying somewhere in that night sky above Austin, and I remember thinking about everyone I'd ever known. And I just began to get this sense of freedom. Like, okay, well, what if I did die? What if I didn't come back? The angel said I'd walk, but what if I can stay here? Do I like it here? And I remember thinking, I love it. And all that matters is I just want to tell everyone back there, I love you, enjoy every moment, have a good life. Like everyone, even people who had been terrible to me. I just felt like that disconnect that you feel during a near-death experience where you've left the physical behind. That's no longer who you are. And this experience began to take on a deeper meaning for me. So a lot of near-death experiences have a tunnel experience, but I was floating in the sky, and then I just transitioned quickly into this deeper cosmos of the stars. And I felt this intelligence coming toward me, sort of like you feel when you're just meditating. You feel this wave of light come towards you, but this light was coming towards me, and I knew that it was just higher intelligence. That's what I called it at that time. And this higher intelligence said, I want to show you some things in your life. And out into the night sky, different parts of my life were projected. And times in my life when I was a kid and played with animals and, was kind to people, those were considered good moments. And, the parts of my life, like the partying in college, the light really didn't even, say that was wrong or right. It was just kind of nothing. It wasn't good nor bad. And what was bad was, or what, my soul felt ashamed of, was when I saw very good people and they were near me, and I chose to judge them, and I chose to not give them a chance, and I wasn't interested in knowing them for very superficial, silly reasons. And I was 22, and they didn't like the same music I liked, or the same clothes, or the same, they didn't go to university. And I saw their hearts on the other side, and I was shocked. And I thought, oh, they're really good people, and they actually pray for me because they think I'm depressed. And I felt so overwhelmed that people near me who I worked with that I was not observing, who had a good heart. And that really the heart is what matters the most. And that's what I believe God sees, or, divinity or creator sees, is the intention, the heart, the goodness of people. So that was a huge lesson to me. And I kind of got excited about coming back because I knew I'd be a different person. I knew that I'd have, a more eclectic group of friends and just, a different way of being. And in that moment, that was enough. That was my life review. I felt this next transition, and it felt to me, I know other people call it something different, but it felt like a holding place, but it was like nature, and the grass was perfect. A lot of people would call this heaven, but to me, it just looked as if it was a created heaven, like my consciousness had co-created it with my grandfather, who was on the other side. And we created something together that looked like what I'd grown up around, except in perfection. And so I grew up in East Texas, and there were rolling green hills. The grass was swaying almost with a breeze or with music. It was just beautiful. And my first thought is, oh, there's no death. There's no decay. It's perfect. Everything is just gorgeous. And even my grandfather, he looked so young, I hardly recognized him, but the same square jaw and his same eyes gave me a clue of who he was. And his eyes, like the angels, just shone with great love. And he spoke with telepathy as well. I don't know if you've seen that SNL skit where, they're talking about near-death experiencers, but I swear that in that skit, one of them, the one where she was talking about her grandfather, I swear I say some of the same things. My grandfather held me there with love, and I was so at peace. But it's the truth, that was the only person at 22 who I knew who had died, and we had a special bond, and really a bond that was based around faith. I was his only grandchild, and my dad was his only son, and he died of leukemia when I was 10. And I was the last person to see him alive. I left something in the hospital room, and I ran back out and to get it before he died. And he looked at me, and he had that moment where people dying do, where they have just a burst of strength. And he waved at me and said, "Goodbye, Tricia." And it was an important moment because we came back from lunch, and then he had passed. And I just felt like he had made an effort in life to know me. And so to see him there was incredibly comforting. And it was that one person who'd given me unconditional love, and really just on a soul level. My dad's parents were great grandparents, kind of salt of the earth country folk, but they were loving. And so seeing him there put me at ease. And people sometimes ask, well, what do you do in heaven. And I can say, there's an odd part of my near-death experience. He showed me the truck that he had given our family. So it was this, beautiful vintage, Chevrolet truck, and it had just rusted in the yard when I lived there, and it was perfect. Again, it was just bright blue. And so I got in the back of this truck and he was driving, and my spirit form decided, since he was younger, that I'd be a child. And so my spirit form kind of morphed into this childlike being, because there were certain messages that I was hearing, from the light. And one of them was, be like a little child. So I took that literally. And then another message was, love is all that remains and all that you take with you when you go. And it made sense to me, because all that there was between my grandfather and I was love, not really the moments of sadness in the hospital or the decay or any of that. It wasn't important. The importance was how our souls shone and how we loved each other. And that's how I picture people connecting in heaven. Their souls will just remember the good. And so a lot of times people say, there's no way that I will ever forget that. Maybe you do. Maybe the soul literally does forget that, because in the presence of that great love, how can you take the things that are painful with you? And that's what I was beginning to feel. And then at some point, the light was coming towards me even more intensely. And my grandfather turned back and said, would you like to go on? And by that, I knew he meant go towards the light of God. And I thought, I'm not going to miss this. And I just kind of took off and was going towards that light of God. And as I got closer and closer, I felt people's prayers, and I felt the prayers of my mom and dad. So the moment, when my stepdad got that candy bar, he came back and he saw them on their knees praying. And so I felt their prayers. I felt my grandmother's prayers. And I even felt some, different types of prayers, some that were more about themselves, but it was still sweet. And Aunt had lost her daughter in a car wreck. So she was praying that my mom go through what she went through, that it was hard to lose a kid. And so, I just felt these different experiences that people were relating to God about me. And I remember thinking, whatever. So, I just kind of blew through their prayers because God was there, and I was like, I'm way more interested in this. And what is this light? And what is this love that I'm feeling? And, some people go through life somewhat anxious or somewhat not at ease here. Like maybe there are some people who are so grounded and so peaceful that they're completely fine in the body, but I was not one of those people. I was a little bit more anxious and driven, type A. And I remember thinking, oh, this is the first time that I've ever felt really good. This is the first time I've felt really safe, perfect, exactly the way I am. Nothing's gonna harm me. I'm held and I'm also free. And I just felt this intensity of God's love. And it began to wash away a lot of things that I was holding on to, and really just remade me in certain ways, that if there's any part of the near-death experience that I keep coming back to, it's that love. And it's never left me. I can say it's gotten far away, almost like a pinprick sometimes, and I've had to bring it back. But, that love was overwhelming. And in that presence of God, I just felt joyful. I felt whole. I felt complete. I felt better than I'd ever felt. And that was the part in the near-death experience where I said, yeah, no, don't send me back. This feels way too good. This experience is what everyone deserves. This is what's right. That's really not a great place. I'm not going back. And as soon as I said that in my head, there was just this energetic wall that stopped me in my tracks, and I couldn't get closer to that love. And I remember just reacting and going, why? I don't want to go back. And the lights, people ask what the voice of God is like. When something is so strong, it tends to, it's more than telepathy. It kind of boomed through me. So I don't know what it sounds like exactly, but it was just this vibration that was powerful. and this voice said, look down. And then through the fog, or through this area, this opening happened, and it looked more like a metaphor, but I just understood it. And I saw these people walking along a river, and some of them were covered in darkness and some of them were connected to the light. And I understood that the people who were connected to the light were connected to their soul, connected to source, that they were motivated and excited to be alive, that they felt supported by God on some level, or they just felt supported, by the universe, that there was this sense of joy to their experience. And then the darkness, I didn't really think it through on that soul level. And maybe this is why a lot of souls come in and they make soul contracts that are a little, overwhelming. But, I didn't think, oh, this is a, stalker, or this is a sociopath, or this. I just saw, oh, it's just fear. There's just darkness that some people live in, and then need to bring into the light. It's really simple. And from that vantage point, God said, you're going to be a teacher. And I knew, not necessarily spiritual teacher, but I was going to work in public schools and colleges. And that's when I rebelled. And, to rebel in the face of God, or in the light of God, rather, that's a tough thing to do. But I just said, oh, no, you don't know me. You don't understand me. No way. That's terrible. I need money. Teachers don't make any money. I grew up poor. Oh my God, no, do not do this to me. And that was the last thing that I got in the presence of God. And I almost felt like my soul was kind of just like a softball or baseball ball, like crunched up and hurled back into my body. Like it was a message. And I ended up, in my body. And the first thing that I realized is that I'd been in surgery and the nurses were feeding me ice chips. And I know some people have to integrate these experiences for a long time, or they don't even, not integrate, but they have to go back through hypnosis. But I remembered everything about my experience the minute I was conscious, and I understood what had happened because I'd heard of near-death experiences. One, I'd heard of it, I think, in a psychology class, in a religious studies class. And then I'd also heard of a friend who, a friend of hers died of a drug overdose, and she came to see him in the hospital, and she said there was this light about him. He was just different, and he was talking about Jesus and the angels, and how he's healed now, and how like his pain is over and he's going to live differently. And so I heard his story, and then I thought, oh, I had one of those. But the first thing that the nurses wanted me to do was say my name. And honestly, I mean, this is the way I felt. I looked out at the room and down the hall, and I felt still in those first few moments that my consciousness extended far beyond my body, and I had not fully localized into this body. And so when they asked me that question, I said, oh, well, her name is Tricia, and I'm something different. And they were like, no, you're not. You need to say your name. And so there was this resignation of going, oh God, I have to be me. Oh, terrible. Like I was really not quite happy about it, because I just fully understood in that moment that I was going to have a lot of pain. I was going to have to learn to walk again, so not only did I have emotional trauma to still work through, but physical trauma. But now this near-death experience had been added to it. And it just seemed like the near-death experience was the only thing that was important, to be honest. It really did. It just seemed like navigate this world, I have a connection to that other world, and that means everything. And so I was a little afraid, because they were giving me morphine. So I was in the ICU for 3 days. They were constantly checking the, the parts of me that had internal injuries. And, I started picking up on just the way my family related to one another. And I'd never seen it from this viewpoint, but I finally just saw, oh, they really are concerned like I was about the material world. Like I had a tattoo and they were really judgmental about that. And they, they just had all these judgments and they were talking about how much money everything cost. And, let's take pictures of her car and, where am I going to sleep? And, it was just a lot of nonsense. No one grabbed my hand and said, hey, I'm glad you're alive. Like I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it. It was all like, oh, what are we going to have for dinner? I'll be here for you. We'll sleep on this mat. And I remember looking at them and thinking, I'm not going to get the connection I need, but I felt this, overjoyed sense of being because of the near-death experience. And so I started talking about it and I asked my grandmother if she would go get me a notebook. So as soon as I was out of ICU, she got me a pen and paper and I just started quickly writing down everything. So I was afraid I would lose it with the drugs that they had me on in the hospital. And I wrote a poem about the angels and the light and just everything I could remember. And then I just kept talking about it. So I'm sure nurses were like, very strange, but I asked them, hey, do you believe in God? And they're like, I do, I go to church. I was like, well, God is this great big light that's so enormous and it just swallows you up and you just feel so good. And then someone in the room was like, yeah, she's definitely on drugs. And I remember thinking, no, you don't get it. God is an energetic experience. It's not a concept, it's an energy. And so I just kept writing in the notebook and I remember, and I don't know why, I should probably look this up, but maybe my hands hit the steering wheel or my arms did. But I remember as I was writing, my whole, like this part of my arms was just black and blue. And I remember thinking, wow, my body has really been through some intense things. And they put a body cast on me and then time went on and eventually I saw my friends from college. And this was a huge wake up call because I realized how young people, have varying degrees of emotional, intelligence, some of them not so much. And so, there were the friends who couldn't make it to the hospital because they were too stoned to find it. And then there were the friends who showed up and they were there and yet they were a little like self-consumed as well. Like I remember one friend turned to another friend and she said, all week I've been thinking about Trisha's accident and how it could happen to me. And my other friend like slapped her on the shoulder and she's like, it actually happened to her. Like just, talk to her. She went through this. And so then the friends who had been through trauma themselves, had been through a surgery or lost someone close to them, they brought videos and books and candy and, they understood what to do. And then it was the people in the periphery of my life who had the most spiritual knowing and intelligence. I was so grateful when they started showing up, neighbors who were spiritual, because then suddenly I just recognized them. I knew I could tell my story to them and they would believe it and I'd have some support. And so that was just an over excitable moment, when I knew, okay, this person is into spirituality and she'll understand what I'm saying. And later she became a good friend, but my whole idea of what was quote cool had changed, like the ability to be emotionally present, to be aware of other people's pain. Yeah, I just was a different person is the way that I sum it up. I did not feel like myself. And even with all the morphine and the drugs, I was not the same person that went into surgery. And I was aware of that. I was also still kind of battling with teaching. Really wanted to go to law school. Maybe I could just do teaching for a certain amount of time and, pay my debt to God. And there was a lot that I was wondering about. But that last day in the hospital, they made me stand up and I walked, and it was the most painful walk I've ever experienced. I mean, there were 80-year-olds and walkers going faster than me. And I had this walker and it was just, I felt like my head was enormous after laying in bed for 10 days. I just felt like this throbbing pain and all the pain in my back. And I walked to the edge of the room. Everyone was probably going to graduate that evening. And I saw the tower light up and I thought that would have been me. And I would be on a plane to Europe, just to backpack around for a while. And now I'm here. and now I have to be a teacher. And that was the only moment I just allowed myself to just cry and go, this is so unfair. But then I just felt this soul contract, if you want to call it, or if you want to just this like, okay, this is what I was told to do. I'm going to trust in it. I'm going to trust that I'm always taken care of. I'm going to do it. I'm going to return to school as soon as I'm healed, and I'm going to get that teaching certification, and I'm going to teach, and there must be something to it, and there must be some learning to it. So physical, but fun and incredibly painful. It was fun because that consciousness never left me. So I was not someone who meditated frequently. I've been to a few Kundalini yoga classes, and I remembered the fire breathing, and I remembered a few tips from yoga. So I would lay in bed once I returned to my mom's house and just breathe through the pain, because I couldn't tolerate painkillers. And I feel like I felt the angels say we did this on purpose. And, knowing now that a lot of people get addicted to painkillers and opioids, I was like, okay, but this is really hard. And so I felt everything. All I took was like extra strength Tylenol and just laid there, and I couldn't sleep really the first week. So I got into meditation, and I would just leave my body and it would float around. And there were these moments where I couldn't remember. As I was coming back to my body, I was like, am I alive? Am I dead? I've been gone for so long, and then I'd return to that localized body in San Antonio. And I just started asking the angels, look, you healed me in surgery. You need to amplify this healing so that I can sleep through the night. And I imagine their light working on my back. And then I ate a diet, and I'm grateful to my mom for this. She was vegan at the time, and so she was really into fruit and vegetables. And so that was a wonderful way to eat, while healing. So she'd bring me a fruit plate in the morning, and I just made it on fruit and vegetables basically for about 4 months. And I mean, there was one moment where I found the candy bar stash in my stepdad's closet, because I knew that he did like candy. And so I ended up talking about that with my mom. But the recovery was pretty good, actually. I think that we can get through more pain than we realize, and it's actually good to feel pain after surgery and to not numb it, because I knew how to push my limits, how to go, okay, I walked as far as I can. I'm hurting myself now. Now I'm going to go back to bed. And so every day, I pushed myself more and more. And to be honest, I was 22. It's easier to heal when you're young, but I had this growing empathy for anyone who suffers on a physical level. And so once I got out into the neighborhood, I started meeting people, elderly people in my mom's neighborhood. And there was one woman who had survived cancer. And so I told her my story, and she cried, and she was like my supporter at that point. And it was interesting, because I could see someone with a knee replacement or someone who'd been through physical pain. And even though I was this 22-year-old, I was like, I get it. I understand you. Like, I know this is tough. This is a tough journey. Had opened up in a really profound way. There were so many after effects that it's hard to categorize them all, but the lucid dreaming was really easy for me, especially in those first few weeks. And I've heard other near-death experiencers who've had like a heart attack and have to go right back into their lives. And I think, oh, you poor thing, they didn't get that integration time. They're just suddenly thrown back into the world, and that's so hard. But I had 9 months, of recovery, of laying in bed and reading spiritual books and, meditating for hours into the night, and, working on manifestation and, playing around with consciousness. And I had time on my hands, and that was a beautiful thing. And for the first time, no alcohol and drugs, and so I was like clear, and I had a near-death experience, and I just felt amazing. And there was a moment where I sent a poem off to a contest in San Antonio, and I got second place. And so they asked if I could come to their event and read it. And I was still in this body cast, but then I could walk with this weird walking stick. And so I entered the stage with my walking stick and big body cast. And I looked out into the crowd, and I had been deathly afraid of public speaking before that. And I said, okay, God, you want me to teach, so I'm going to have to stand in front of people and talk. You talk through me. You do this. And in that moment, I just felt assisted by the angels. And before I read the poem, I briefly told them about my near-death experience and then read the poem. And I looked up into the audience and I saw this woman who was alone and elderly. And I just knew she had lost her love and that she'd been through a lot. And our eyes just connected. And she had cried listening to my story. And I thought, oh, I told it to her. Like I had a purpose that evening. And that was really to connect with her and remind that it's always going to be like this. You won't reach, but you will reach some people, and you just give your ego away and you go work through me. And it's not about me. It's about, what does someone need in that moment? And then I just settled into it, and I laid in bed and I thought about my childhood, and I thought about what had happened. And, I write honestly about my childhood in the book, but the abuse was profound. I don't go into deep details. In fact, I thought about cutting it. There are a lot of people who cut these things just because their parents are still alive. And I considered it. I was going to cut the chapter about my mom, but then our relationship ended. My stepdad and mom, relationship when I started talking more publicly about the experience, because they are it's really kind of sad. But my mom, during the near-death experience, the time that I was at her house, she went and told at first she believed it, she was like, oh, this is cool. I saw your stepdad get that kid card. He came in and we were praying. And she was like, wow, that's really neat. But then she told her minister about it. And her minister said, near-death experiences are of the devil. Your daughter's either going to kill herself or she's just going to experiment with hallucinogens, and she's just going to be crazy. So this was from the devil. That was a false light. Dude, tell her she's on the wrong track, that she needs to come to our church. And I looked at the pamphlet, and one of the examples that he cited was this woman who had left her husband, and her husband was a Baptist minister and gotten divorced after her near-death experience. And I was like, Mom, he was probably she couldn't relate to him. He was just a jerk. Like he was so judgmental, and it wasn't all hell and fire and brimstone, and I tried to explain. I was like, look, we're both wrong. I was wrong as an agnostic, but you're wrong in some ways too. Like, can we both just know that the truth is we're both loved? Like, God loves you to this enormous degree, and God loves me too. As the rebellious teenager, God loved me so much, and God loves you so much. And that should be what we all just settle into, is that love. And there was a chasm, there was a break, and already it was a tenuous relationship. Like, I'm incredibly grateful to her for taking care of me, but there is this weird abusive streak that she has. And on the first night that I was there at the house, she was helping me in the bathroom, and I started crying because it was painful to go to squat down over the toilet. And she slapped me because I was crying. And I just remember thinking, this is the level of care that I'm going to get here. This is not good. I'm an adult. I'm 5'9". I'm kind of a tall, strong person, and she's 5'2". I was like, she knew if she did this when I was like in physical health, this would not be a good thing. But she chose to use physical domination over me. For what reason, I don't know. But it brought back all these childhood memories and wounds. So I went back to that bedroom, and I was like, okay, you know who she is. You know that you literally cannot say anything. You can't show her any of your emotional pain. You can't show her anything that you're going through. You can only talk about what she's going through. And you'll make it. You'll make it through this time period, as long as you just tell her she's wonderful and you love her food, and oh, she's pretty, and all these things. And so I just settled in to that, and that she would never see the pain, and I made it through that time just fine. So we only had that little altercation that first night, and then the one where the minister gave her that pamphlet, and I just said, I don't care. Like, you can believe that, but I know that the light that I touched, your soul knows the difference between God and the devil. Like, I know that I was seeing truth and light, not something that is false. That love, that level of love is life changing. And your soul knows the difference, like that was the main thing. So I didn't go to her church, and we just kind of left it at that. So the weird after effects that happened were things that I was sometimes uncomfortable with. I would know I'd get psychic flashes in the beginning. I felt like I was outside of time. And so I'd know what song was on the radio. When my mom and stepdad went to work, I like to turn on the radio and, just walk around the house for exercise. And I just know I'd start singing the song almost like I could hear it over the airwaves, and then turn it on exactly where it was in the programming. And then I started just feeling some forms of PTSD. Like there were moments where the television would show like a stretcher, and that would cause me to get out of body really quickly because I remembered the hospital. And so I'd hover above my body for a second, then come back. And so I called it just being lucid from my form. Lucid dreaming was very easy. And also just, periodically disconnecting was easy. And I thought, okay, this is probably going to calm down in a couple of years. As I heal, I'll be more grounded in my body. And one of the messages from my near-death experience was remind them to go to nature. So eventually I went to the backyard, and I would try to ground and be in that space with nature and with my experience. And I remember thinking about all the kids that I'd probably talked to. I was like, okay, so child abuse is probably really important. It's an important topic, and a lot of kids have been emotionally or physically or sexually abused, and I'm gonna cross them. And what can I say to help them and support them? Maybe that's part of my message. Maybe that's part of why I went through what I went through in order to help these kids coming through. And I thought, okay, then maybe that's the contract. And what else have I experienced that I can help other people with? And I just started thinking about all of that. And eventually I got kind of excited about teaching. I thought, my major was English. It's going to be really easy to weave the spiritual world into different poems and different lessons and alliance and all kinds of topics through literature. I thought, okay, this is not a bad mission. This is a good mission, that everyone needs a point of love. And even the best of families, the most loving of families, sometimes the kids just need a little extra something from someone who believes in them, a coach or a teacher. And I thought, there's always something kind you can do. So the first thing I will do is I'll never say an unkind word to a student. And that was, like my pact with myself, do no harm. I was like, okay, so if I do no harm, if I try to add light or joy to their lives in some way, maybe I'll help them. And then I thought, what? It's subversive, but I'm going to tell my near-death experience story to every single group of students at some point, not hello, the first day, although I did that in some cases, but at some point, every teacher gets off topic and they tell a wild story. And I was like, that's what I'll do to every single group of my students. And so as I thought through all this, it was eventually time to leave my mom's house, and I had asked for a sign, and I tried to manifest this sign, and it actually happened. And I won't go into it, but then I knew it was time to return to school, and I registered for classes. And before I knew it, I was in front of a group of students. And could you believe it? But the first group of students that I had a student in there who was 19, and it was a group of juniors, and he had been in a coma for a couple of years because he had a brain injury and he had a near-death experience. And so when I told my near-death experience story, he was like, yeah, that happened to me. I was like, okay, well, we're going to write about it. And that's all you're going to write about in your journal. And we're going to talk about it. I'm going to help guide you through it. And that first group of students, it just blew me away. There was so much more that they needed than I realized. They needed so much help. And I thought, wow, I'm really of use. And then I also realized that, God is so incredibly loving that the message wasn't just to help them, teaching somehow healed me. So in each interaction, I was like, oh, I get to be there for someone way someone wasn't there for me. I get to, just make life work in a different way for people. And that begins to heal someone in me, that I can talk to that child from a long time ago and go, hey, if you could have rescued yourself, this is what you've done. And so time and time again, there were students who came to me in deep pain, and I was able to help them in some small way, or sometimes in really traumatic ways. There was a lot of evenings I had calls that were, and I taught in everything from urban schools to country schools to some of the best prep schools on the East Coast, just like the whole gamut of experiences with kids. And they are dramatic. The experiences are incredibly dramatic in urban poverty stricken areas. And I think if everyone volunteered just like a year of their life and helped in that situation, that they think so differently about the youth and have a lot of hope for them, but also like profound empathy in what they go through. And so there were so many times I felt like I was just teaching basic survival skills to students, that it really wasn't about teaching, it was about surviving. And one of the moments in the classroom that will always stand out to me is I was teaching during 9/11, and I was teaching a group of high school seniors. And when that happened, I just suddenly scanned the classroom and understood that many of them would join the military and some of them would die. And so that's when I chose to tell my near-death experience story. And we just spent, like not right when 9/11 happened, but a week or two after that event. So we just talked about life and death, and the sacrifices people make, and we did everything in relation to that. And I realized that my students at that age had ghost stories to tell. This one student had this adorable story where her grandfather told her mom, never sell this house. And when he died, she sold the house. And years later, she ran into the woman and her small kids who had bought the house. And she said, I have to tell you, there was this spirit in the house. It was an older man, and he saved my daughter's life, though. The house was burning down, and they talked to the guy, and he was like, get out of there, go run. And so the kids left the house before it burned down. And so she was like, oh, wow, I really should listen to my grandfather. He was trying to protect the house there and protect it. But my students told me their paranormal stories, and I realized that everyone has some sort of spiritual experience. There are the agnostics out there who claim not to, but I doubt them, because I flashed back to this moment I dated an atheist, at one point in college, and I considered myself agnostic. I just had this kind of random feeling like, well, maybe it's like Walt Whitman, we just like become the grass. There's some little consciousness that continues. But he was like strictly about it. We had this moment where it was my 18th birthday, and we're walking down in Dallas, the area where JFK was killed, and I saw these people way down the road, and they looked like they were in the theater or something, and they just looked like they had rosy cheeks, and it was like, who are they? Are they homeless? They just look odd. And he stood transfixed too, like we could not figure out who these people were. And I had just said, it's kind of sad that I don't have any money. You took me to the JFK museum, but I can't even buy us lunch. My parents forgot about my birthday. And there's no way these people could have heard that. They were way, way far away. And one of the guys came up and he gave me a $20 bill and he said, happy birthday. And they walked on. And I was like, I felt like it was a supernatural moment, even though I just didn't understand what had happened, as if maybe they were angels in human form for a moment, or there was just some kind of psychic connection and he said the right thing at the right time. But it felt like a spiritual moment. And I turned to the boyfriend who was an atheist, And he just took a deep breath and he said, I'll never talk about this moment ever again, and then moved on. And so I knew he felt it, and I knew he was just choosing not to admit that it was real. And so I think even atheists have had some sort of moment, that is intense for them in some way that other people would call spiritual, but they just discredit it or don't think about it or don't talk about it. But the thing that really hit me with that class is that I was really a part of their lives, and they were a part of my lives in this moment in time, changed us forever. And that, that was the moment I truly understood why God had told me to go into teaching. And so I just loved it. I mean, and one thing I realized is that when I tried to take the reins and I tried to take control, things did not turn out so well in my life. So whether that was relationships or, what I did in the summer, but the minute I stepped in the classroom, I gave it all to, the other side, to God, to angels. And I said, okay, work through me. And it worked. And then I thought at some point I really came to this conclusion that, oh, I've got to stop whatever it is that I think I'm doing with the rest of my life. And I've got to live the same way I live in the classroom. I've really got to give problems to God. I've got to believe that, there are answers to things. And there were many times that were difficult. I won't lie. Like there was a moment, maybe and I was in pain, and I kept going to neurosurgeons, and I kept going to different people saying, I don't know what's wrong with my neck, but I'm at a level 10 in pain, and I cannot live this way. And so I was starting to think, is my life over? Like, is this the end? And then I went, I said, okay, I'm going to go on a pilgrimage, every summer. I'm going to go to this cathedral. And I went to this cathedral in Taos, Chimayo, and I heard it was a healing cathedral. And the first time I went into that cathedral, I felt actually the presence of Jesus. And I was kind of shocked because Jesus was not in my near-death experience, but I just felt him as this, this master, this beautiful healer, very much in the physical form. And he reminded me of the statement, be like a little child. And he was like, it's time to start working on that inner child. And so I started emotional healing, and then I got a little better, but not really that much better. And then I went back another time, and there was another piece. And then the third time I went to a Nuka chiropractor afterwards, and they used this little gun on my neck, and all the pain was gone. And so I've stayed pretty much pain-free just from going to that type of chiropractor. But I remember just crying and being so grateful for that answer, and realizing that, whatever the problem is in life, there is an answer. And sometimes you have to search, and, my answer may not work for you, but you do have to just give yourself over to that process and believe that you're assisted by angels, you're assisted by the support that you need on your journey. And so about 6 years ago, I was working at Trinity River campus. I've been there for 12 years now, but 6 years ago, it was just this amazing experience. College campus, like I could ever imagine, as junior reaches out to poverty-stricken areas in Fort Worth and help students. So, I've had gang members who are now history professors, and I've had, women who are prostitutes who are now nurses. I mean, like I have all these stories, people who took their lives from one place into another place. And I've had, other single moms who are on welfare, who now are traveling to Germany, and their students, their kids are in private schools. And it's, when you stay in one place long enough, you get to see the transformation. And I thought, it must be hard to be a judge or a police officer and see people just make the wrong choices, but aren't I lucky to see the miracles? Aren't I lucky to see like people change their lives around and do and get it right and have the light come on. And not that, but quite a few do. And I realized something about teaching, that when you force people to do service, and I do force my students to do community service, the light comes on. Like most of them do not drop out because they become friends with each other. They realize that they're giving back. They feel this sense of a connection to their community, even if they themselves are poor. If they're reading to a kid who's also struggling, it reminds them of themselves, and they get it. And they understand that service to the community helps them. And so there was a lot of magic in those first 6 years of the campus. I was walking up the stairs one day, though, and I heard God's voice again, and God said, "Your mission's complete." And I was like, "What? What do you mean I don't have to teach? What are you talking about? Am I going to die? Are you just going to, is lightning going to strike me now? I'm not that old, but okay. If it's time, it's time." And I really was stunned. And I didn't quite understand what
I
to
don't
do.
think so. I think it's still in the last. Oh, yeah.
And one thing that hit me was, oh, this is what everyone feels like who has a near-death experience and doesn't have a specific mission. What do you do? So, my retirement is tied to teaching, and I just thought, well, I'll stay here until I figure it out. But I decided to write the book, and then I decided to start interviewing other experiencers and getting involved in the spiritual community, and really just trying to figure out what would I do if I wasn't teaching. And I think on some level, it doesn't matter as long as I'm assisting, people in some way, as long as that light is being transmitted, that it doesn't matter what you're doing, working at a coffee shop, even, just if you're kind to people and that light comes through you, then that's what matters. So I continue to teach, but it doesn't feel quite the same, to be honest. I felt like there were certain students who I had a soul contract with, and it's like their lives would have gone off track in some bizarre way had they not crossed paths with me. And that, there were enough of those that happened that for whatever reason, I was just destined to be in their lives, and they were destined to be in mine. And now it's still fun teaching, but I'm just in a different place with everything. And it's been a joy connecting with the spiritual community, but I'm still, I think, just in transit and transition from what happened to what comes next. But I love telling this story, and I would love to start taking questions a little bit early. There's only one more thing I would like to say. Spiritual community is I believe, there's some trauma that I didn't get into in my story, but I believe we release trauma easier together when we go out in nature, when we meditate together. Diane's, playing of the flute, but is beautiful. It would be even better if we were all just sitting on the ground out in nature together. That community is so important, and there's something healing about being there together and assisting one another on that spiritual journey. So one of the things that I'm going to start doing in my area is just leading meditations out in nature. I don't want to be in a hotel room. I don't want to be, in a conference room. I want to be in nature. Since that was one of the messages from the near-death experiences, healing happens on a visceral level when we just feel more peaceful, in nature.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So if people have questions, they can put them on the chat, and we can start asking some of your questions. Claire wants you to just keep going.
And I can talk for a long time, but I can talk for a long time about your questions too. Talking is not a problem.
So if anybody has questions, please write them out. Yeah.
So the name of the book, Angels in the OR, what Diane taught me about healing, survival, and transformation. And I actually asked the angels to tell me how to write this book. And I love the Russian writers and Faulkner and people who have this intense diction and lots of descriptive details. I mean, I studied them and I was like, oh, I'm gonna write the great American novel. I'm gonna include so many details. And they were like, oh no, you're not. And I was like, what do you mean? And you're you're not going to give a lot of details, you're going to give enough details, and you're going to get people, you're going to start with the near-death experience, and you're going to move people through this quickly where they can consume it in an evening or a plane ride, that it's going to be a quick read. And so I can't tell you how many people have said they've sat down and just read my book all night, or they have read it, over a couple of days. And I was guided to use a certain technique, when writing it. And I had to get my ego out of it as an English major and really listen to the other side and cut words and cut stories and, cut these side stories that I want to go on, but, just streamline the book. But I loved writing it. And then I also continued to grow and learn since writing a book. So one of angels have been telling me over and over and over to do is to be writing course or writing community. So I finally did it, but I did it during Mercury retrograde. So it has not exactly taken off. I have 4 students, but it's fun. I want to guide people who want to write about their experiences, their spiritual experiences, and kind of give them techniques, because we all are good in some areas of writing and then we struggle in other areas. And so I thought, well, hey, I can help people tap into intuition, but I can also help them with actual technique and writing what they want to write. So that is part of what I'm doing. I also give medium readings, and that's a long, how that started, but I didn't want to, like reluctant medium, but a lot of parents were calling me and asking me just to do it for free. And so I started doing that, way more into theta healing. The medium readings can be healing, beautiful as well, but theta healing is fun. So did you ever tell the neurosearch? Yes. So this is an interesting story. The long story is this. Soon as she walked in and I was able to talk, I said, "Hey, Dr. Florin, I died." And she stepped back, like visibly stepped back a couple of paces. And I said, "How long was I dead?" And she was like, "A couple of minutes, but we revived you. And look, you've got these blood transfusions and you're fine and everything's going to be fine. Like the success of the surgery is amazing. Your back looks great. You're going to walk. Let's talk about that." And I tried one more time and she just gave me this look, and I could intuit that she was saying, if you keep talking about this, it's not going to be good for you. And I've later heard that some near-death experiencers were sent to the psychiatrist, or they were, treated badly. So I just got that vibe from her and I was like, okay, I will shut up now. and so I didn't talk about it. But here's the weird thing. When I was writing the book, I looked up her because I was like, I'm going to say her name. 8 years after my surgery, she died in a head-on collision, a young, brilliant surgeon. And what happened is people were waiting a long time for surgery. When she was there, I waited 17 hours. When she died, they said there was a shortage, and some people were waiting 30 hours for a neurosurgeon in Austin, that there was like this incredible wait. And then I was like, oh my goodness, let me, set with this. I think it was the Bio Channel. When they interviewed me, they got the hospital records and they tried to contact her because they wanted her to be on the show, but she was dead. And they got the medical records, and I finally learned that I had been dead for 2.5 minutes and that the cause of death was bleeding to death. So or what caused that, and they said cauterizing some of the veins, and just my heart came back online. And so that was in the blood transfusions. But when I heard that she died, I tried to connect with her in spirit, and eventually she came to me, and it's like, her kids aren't ready to hear the story yet, but she kind of feels like a second mom in a way, like she's supportive on that level. Like she gets it, that she's with me on this journey. And theta healing. Okay, so, I'd heard of Reiki and I'd heard of all these healing modalities. And then when I heard of theta healing, I was like, that's the one I'm going to do. Like different things resonate with different people, but it just makes so much sense to me in terms of the near-death experience. So I felt really annoyed to come back to my body, remember? So I believe that our ancestors have survived so much, and that in our genetics and in our DNA, we probably hold some programs that are not that helpful to us, because they kept it in their programming, for the sake of survival. So theta healing clears programs at the DNA level, at the core level, at the soul level, and then at your life history level, it just collapses trauma around a certain statement or a certain belief, and then gives you more of an opening. So whatever it is that you're working on, whether it is any limiting belief, basically. So if you have one of those thoughts, like one thing I'm working on in myself is, just if something is stressful, I'll replay it and think about how I could have done something different. And I thought, it's not really helpful. Like, I'm in a different moment, like we need to let stress go, and we need to focus on creating a better, next moment. And so, they and get a copy of your book to Seguin, Texas. Oh yeah, you know what? Actually, if you give me your address, I will just send you a copy, and then you a copy to donate. Like that. I always love it when people donate to a rape crisis center, a jail, a domestic violence center, a orphanage, like somewhere where people are really hurting, and or a public library. I wish that my publisher was better at that, but whatever. Publishing industries, if I would have written it back in '94, it would have been a different journey. it was a hard one this time, but I am on Audible. The book is read, not me, but someone read it, and the book, like, because I'm an English major, I was like, gonna get an agent, I'm gonna traditionally publish this. It feels good to say, Simon and Schuster distributes me and I'm on Audible, but that's just ego. Like, it's just as good on some level to self-publish, because the publishing industry takes so much of the money, and they lie to you and they hide. I mean, it's just awful. Like, they're struggling. I think, when 1 million books come out each year, and this is self-published and published, that's a ton of books. This is the information age, so people are just overloaded with books. But still, I don't want to discredit reading. I know some people still love it, and I am so grateful for the readers. In the information age, I say, when people take the time, even if it is just 6 hours of their life, to read my book, wow, I'm really grateful, that I was 6 hours of your life, and today, 2 hours.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's wonderful. Let's see. Oh, this is an address, Clara, for Clara.
Oh, yay. I know Seguin. I'm going to copy it too. So. So yes, sometimes the place where you live, it's really weird. I've tried to donate at Fort Worth and they won't accept it, but I called New York City, and like some of these big, like areas, and they're like, yes, we'll definitely take a copy. Thank you so much. And I'm like, the prophet is never accepted in their hometown. Exactly, Kathleen. I couldn't give my speech in Austin. Like, I wanted, the book launch to be there, and I tried so hard, and they were so snotty to me. Like, I was like, I have a following, I'll bring a crowd, because they wanted to, like, make it, I don't know, they just didn't accept me. So I went to Sedona, and it was so beautiful. The Unity Church there, they were like, oh, angel communicators, we love you guys. And I was like, okay, this will take me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Wow, it's such a wonderful story, and you tell it so well. I just can't thank you enough for coming. This has just been great. I hope that sometime, if we get past this pandemic, you'll come to Chicago and visit us in person. Most of our speakers came in person before the pandemic, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person one of these times and have a good weekend visit in Chicago. It would be terrific. Um, does anybody else have any other questions?
Learn things, along the way from other
It's kept breaking up. I can't hear.
people. What I was saying, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sometimes people have questions about other people's experiences. So I've interviewed a lot of near-death experiencers, and I've asked some hard questions because I want to, kind of dig into what they have been through and then just relate as well. So I was really curious to interview Howard Storm, and I'm sure you're familiar with his story. He experienced,
He's been here
hell.
3 times.
Oh, really?
I've had 3 weekends with him. He spent 3 weekends with me. He was our first speaker, actually, and
Oh, really?
and his talk is on YouTube. The first one that he gave, it's really poor quality, but after the first 10 words, you don't miss the quality because you're so engrossed in what he has to say. And that's my favorite telling of his story, is that first
Oh,
one
cool.
from 2000.
Yeah.
2000.
Well, I loved interviewing him because he has a sense of humor about it all. And I do too. And, I asked him, well, do you think you had the experience that was right for you? Because I feel like my experience was catered to me and who I was. Like, would you not have changed had you not experienced hell? And he stopped for a minute and he was like, yeah, you're probably right. I had an experience catered to me that really, that all-knowing God knows what we need in order for our soul to evolve and to change and to grow. And one thing I really love from his experience too is
Yes.
telling them to love everyone, or to be a teacher than it is to be a minister, because it's pretty easy, to get my students to love everyone. When we go do community service, that's actually easy. Like that's actually an easy way. When we plant a garden for elementary school kids, or we tutor kids, or we serve the homeless, there's a more direct link to love in the community. And you may not know Fort Worth that well, but we a lot of my students were working at the same location where that book, Ron Hall, the same kind of different as me. He wrote about working with a homeless man. His wife was dying of cancer, and she had this vision from God and told him that he was going to work at this place. And then she died, and he ended up spiritual story right down the road from my campus. So my campus was opening right when that book came out, and it was just kind of a neat connect, that, in Fort Worth, Texas, there are these spiritual crossroads, these moments of great beauty that are happening in some really desolate areas. I mean, you look at this Lancaster area, and I mean, it was really rough, but in just a few years, it has changed dramatically.
Yes. One of the things that I learned on the other side was that there is no one way to do anything. And that comes back to me all the time. That's what there's a small handful of phrases that have been with me ever since I was on the other side that guide my life on a regular basis. That's one of them.
I love it. That's so good. And someone just asked, can you say more about angels versus light beings? Do you experience different types of light beings? Oh, Mary, good question. Yeah, so didn't know what to call them. I just called them light beings for a long time. But I was the angels and it's just, it rolls off the tongue, just keep it like that. And so I'll tell you 2 moments. One moment when I returned to college, I was talking with a spiritual friend, and we were at lunch, and he asked me, he said, hey, do you still see angels? Can you visually see them? And I felt down for a moment, and I was like, I can't. I can kind of feel the light coming in from the other side. And I put my head down, and then I looked up on the sidewalk, and I saw everyone's angels. I saw people walking by with their angels. And then I also saw some ghosts. I was like, oh, there's some people who are of transition who are wandering by us right now as well. And I thought this would be so disorienting to see. I put my head down and the vision went away. But that moment happened, and there were several moments where I was just at a certain place at a certain time, and I helped a soul transition that needed to. So you could say ghost or someone lost. When I went to graduate school, there was a burial grounds, Native American burial grounds, not too far from it, and lots of bizarre technological things would happen in this one dorm room. So I just went there, felt the spirit, asked it to leave and go to the light, and explained what I'd seen and how beautiful it was, and I felt the spirit just go there. And so I was happy to help some things transition. I also, one of the after effects was I could see in elderly people's eyes, so no one knew that he was sick, but I just looked at him, and when he left, I told my grandmother, oh, he's gonna die in a couple of months. And she looked at me kind of funny, and she said, only his wife, and only his wife has told me, that he has, I think, colon cancer. And so then he died in a couple of months. And my grandmother's so funny. She was like, do not tell me if you see the light in my eyes. And so that was our joke between each other. And she actually is still alive. She's 92 and survived COVID. And a strong lady, but I hate to tell her, and I didn't tell her, but I'm beginning to see the light in her eyes. The last time I saw her, she's becoming more lucid, and there's this beauty that people get when they are near death. I feel it and see it, this transcendence that's actually absolutely beautiful. And I think they start, in some people, they just start leaving their body a little, like I can connect with her in spirit just when she's in dreams, if they were just napping. But have I experienced other kind of light beings? Guides, yeah. So I was kind of shocked. Part of my story, I didn't want to be public for a lot of reasons. And I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, I have to be on social media, and I have to do something on social media platforms. And I thought, okay, I'll tell my story once on YouTube, whatever. But I didn't want to. I was like, I don't want to. And I went into meditation, and I felt these 6 light beings that, to be honest, felt like perhaps aliens, but they were just light beings that were sitting somewhere above the planet. Hey, just like teaching, and there's some people in Spain who need to hear your near-death experience story. So you're going to get on YouTube right now, and you're going to make it. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. And oddly enough, my story was translated into Spanish like immediately. Like this actor called me and said, hey, can I put subtitles up? My mom loves these stories. And so like the Spanish viewing and, Spain was really high. There was this US, Canada, and then Spain. I was like, interesting. So someone there needed the story. So I have felt those different types of light beings. I don't get totally into the paranormal, though it is fun. We were going to have a conference here in Texas, but it was canceled, a paranormal conference. And I was excited to hear some of the speakers who love going to all the ghost, the haunted places around here and filming things. But also that, and he sent me a recording, and this is years ago, of what is it? It's a voice, an EMP, or what is it called? That voice that comes through from the other side. And it was a recording, and it was just, you could hear the static and then this voice. And I had a Dutch Shepherd at that time, this beautiful, intelligent dog, and every hair on her body stood up. She was sound asleep. She yelped and like jumped up in the air and ran out of the room. And I was like, okay, that was definitely paranormal. The dog was like, no way. Oh, it's good. Sarah said it's electronic voice phenomenon, the EVP. That's what it is. Yeah. So yeah, the light beings.
Yes.
And of
yes.
course, there are some people probably who like to believe that, maybe the angels were aliens assisting. I just know that they were beautiful and intelligent and androgynous. And I felt humbled that they were there to support me, that something with that level of intelligence cared about my life. And, I think if we knew how much support we have on the other side, we'd all feel humbled, that, although this journey is hard, there's way more support than we realize. And so I believe on calling on them for many things. So, like, I believe angels can help at the doctor's office. They say that you get a better diagnosis from a doctor who's happy. So I generally give compliments and gifts and pray that the angels send them good energy, so that they give a better analysis of what's going on. So any other questions?
I too, I find that I talk to my guides all the time, and it just, I tell people this, and sometimes people say, well, I try and nothing happens. And what I've discovered is that if the things that you ask for interfere with the reasons that you're here, you come here for lessons, you come here to learn things. And if something that you ask for is going to interfere with you learning this lesson, they won't do it. But if it's just out of the blue help, it's just amazing, some of the things they come up with. And it's, like the $20 bill. That's so typical of spiritual guide help from the other side. And it happens so often. And people, because they don't know what it is, they just kind of say, oh, wow, wasn't that interesting? And they go on and they don't put them together, or don't really recognize the importance of what happened. But once you know about it and you can observe it, and you think about it a little bit, and you see these things happen on a regular basis, these are daily miracles, and they're our connection to the other side and to our source and to each other. And there's nothing that is more valuable in life than the loving connections we have with our source and our colleagues and our friends and loved ones.
Yeah, and you can ask for focused intention too. So if you're working on physical healing, I've asked about that. I've even played around with it. I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to tell people that they can do this if it's not real. So, okay, angels, and like, I burned myself one time cooking, and it was a pretty bad burn. I said, okay, then I'm going to go into meditation. I took a picture of it, and I'm going to ask for as much angelic help as possible. And we're going to focus on this. And really, I spent a long time. So 4 hours in meditation, that's a long focused time, but basically I was just feeling the energy. And when I lifted up my hand, it wasn't completely healed, but it was miraculously healed. There was a big difference between. So I think focused intention helps too when you have time. Like, we want so many quick fixes, but focused intention does speed the healing. So focusing everything on goodness, focusing everything on that power and that light from the other side. And it does take some time. But one of the things I like about theta healing too is it just opens up space inside people to begin to find to source. There's someone asked if I lead meditations on YouTube. I do, and I might upload some theta healings, but if you want, we could end this, if Diane's okay with this, but I could do a theta healing,
Wonderful.
for just the group to clear, really just.
Tricia, before you do that, do you want to answer Joe's question?
Oh yeah.
He says, do angels ever take on a physical form here on Earth in order to interact with someone?
I think so. I think that that moment when I was given the $20 bill, I can't tell you how odd they looked. They looked like they did not belong in this time period. Like maybe they got the costumes wrong. Yeah, they looked like they were kind of old English hobos, from another time period. They didn't quite fit Dallas, Texas.
I also,
Your idea of what a homeless person would, and they also
I also think that sometimes people, angels take on lives and actually live a life to be a pillar or a guide to a group of people, or just for whatever reasons. There's no one way to do anything. They come for different reasons, but I do believe that sometimes they do come at the more evolved people to specifically help mankind or to help something.
yes.
I think it does happen. Yes.
I think so too. And someone just asked, so I'll post it. The one that it has Spanish translations, because she has family in Spain.
Mhm.
And so it was an early video. I think it was the very first one that I made. And if you click on it, you can see the Spanish one. So I will just post that in the chat.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, but one thing that, it's a basic theta healing, but I could just give everyone a download for a deeper connection to that unconditional love of God, really creator's version of what that unconditional love is. I think that's usually the most
Wonderful.
important part of a near-death experience. So I just, I joke that if I could put my hands up and just like give everyone that experience of what it was like to be, that near that love, I would do it. But, I always tell people, keep asking for it, keep putting that intention out there, not for a near-death experience, but just for that love to just permeate every part of your being. Because I do believe it is our divine right to be connected to that love, and that I also believe it's incredibly healing. So that surrender that I talked about at the first of this talk, there's also power. Like there have been such tough situations in my life after the near-death experience that I just couldn't work through them. I just was like, it's too much. I don't understand why people behave this way. And I gave it to God. And in those moments of giving certain, small situations to God, say someone who treated me bad at work or in life, for no apparent reason, I couldn't even remember their names afterwards. Like it was erased so completely from my consciousness that it was almost as if God was saying, it's not a light. You don't have to carry it. You don't have to try to keep figuring it out, thinking about it, wondering about it. It's not for you to worry about. That's their projection. That's, just move on.
That's wonderful.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
that is such a great feeling. So I can't tell enough, when you're caught in pain, ask for that help, ask for divinity. But yeah, if people are open, I'd love to lead a theta healing, and I'll just clear the program of, well, you tell me, like, when you think about having that power of love in your life, what gets in the way of that source coming into your life? If someone could put that in the chat, that would be interesting to hear.
What gets in the way?
Yeah, so busyness.
The love.
Yeah, what gets in the way of connecting with that love? Distractions and fear. Okay, so the material realm, anger, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was thinking it would definitely be fear. I'm glad someone said fear. So, all right, so I will clear fear of connection to God's love, to Creator's love, and then just ask for a download of that unconditional love.
Wonderful.
So if you would just close your eyes, and you might want to put your hand on your heart and just imagine that all of the stress of anything that you're working through this week or next week just float away from you. And that you are protected, you're in the light. Even your aura is washed clean with that light. Imagine all of your chakras, the crown chakra, like a flower, receiving a waterfall of light and love through every part of your body. So healing your brain, deepening your own intuition, removing any blocks to the throat chakra, healing any wounds at the heart level and setting you free at that level. And as the light reaches the solar plexus, you might feel the spiritual realm begin to merge with the spiritual, with the material and spiritual realm merging together, supporting one another at this level. And as the light moves through your sacral and root chakra, just feel greater peace. And then through your feet into that Mother Earth energy. And as that light comes back up your body, just feel greater and greater peace. You can say this internally. You can just give me permission to clear any blocks, any fears you have to connecting with that love of divinity, or just fear in general that prevents you from connecting to that love. You just internally say, yes, I will do this. Dear Creator, I command at that ancestral level, that everyone who is here and wishing for this connection, that you delete any programs that run saying, I let fear get in the way of connection to divinity. Yes. Fear prevents me from connecting to divinity. Yes. Depression connects me from connecting to divinity. The stress of the material world disconnects me from the spiritual world. Yes. Just delete all those programs and everyone at the ancestral level and everyone's mother's side and father's side, going back all generations. We thank them for all that they survived and all the natural fears that they had in life. Many of them have transitioned to that other side and understand that light, but in their DNA, in their genetics, they held on to that program. So delete that, and everyone now. Fear prevents me from connecting with divinity. Yes, command that you delete that program and give everyone at the genetic DNA level a program of, I know creators of unconditional love. I know it feels like, know what the support feels like. And it's done, it's done. And at that soul level, Creator, I command that you delete any programs of, I let fear disconnect me from the spiritual realm and unconditional love. Yes. And replace this in everyone's soul with, I know Creator's definition of unconditional love. My soul in other lifetimes has popped in between lives. I know what that love feels like and know it in my soul. It is my divine right. It is the truth that guides me. It's done, it's done, it's done. And at that core level, Creator, I command that you delete the belief, I let the material world interfere with my spiritual connection. Yes, I let fear dominate my thoughts. Yes, I let anger dominate my thoughts. Yes, and disconnect me from that spiritual realm. So at this core level, we are fed so much information from advertising, media, social media, other sources. So just delete those programs and give everyone here a complete download of what creators love feels like at that core level. Creators' definition of unconditional love. It's done, it's done, it's done. At that history level, we can't delete our history, but I just ask that everyone present here turn back in time and watch trauma collapse in their field and remember beautiful moments of connection. Remember that love is all that we take with us to the other side. So the moments of joy, not the moments of horror or sadness or loss. That the moments of beauty are what we take with us. So remember those, give them more space. And also to the very young child within you, just some love to that child. Remind that child that you are here to guide the child. You can help. And give everyone at that history complete love, unconditional love feels like in their cells, in the cells of their body, in their consciousness, in their awareness. It's done, it's done, it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you, Tricia.
You too. You too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I joke that like a whole hour of theta healing and people's faces look different afterwards. You know, like there's something relaxing about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
And really, you don't need any modality, though. I mean, some modalities help, but I swear that, you know, just that giving of problems, giving of illnesses, giving of anything to that unconditional love, you know, just with humility works miracles.
It's very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated at all. It's right there, this close. This close.
Exactly. Exactly.
Have faith. So if no one else has any questions, I'll remind everybody that we have Bruce Grayson coming next month. And in December, we have a special guest, Brian Clark, who is with us today, who was one of the 18 survivors from Tower 2 and 9/11. And he was given messages and had some of these special experiences himself. And so we'll continue this conversation in December with Brian. So glad to see you, Brian, and looking forward to your messages in December. So go with joy, go with kindness, go with love, and share it all. Blessings to you all.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank
Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome. I feel very blessed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tricia. You're a golden being.
We are blessed.
A&E's I Survived Beyond the Facts, season 1, episode 5. I was sandwiched in between two very lovely people who had heart attacks and had a near-death experience that way. I had a car wreck and I was a senior in college at the time. And this race was a symbol, the Austin 10K was a symbol of me getting my life back together, stopping the partying and figuring out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I was about to graduate with an English degree, but I did not want to teach. I wanted to go into editing, maybe law school down the line. Because I grew up poor, I wasn't interested in teaching, and that's an important fact that features in the near-death experience later. Well, this wreck, during the wreck, I broke 3 vertebrae. They're completely shattered, and pieces of the bone fragments were pressing on my spine. I was beginning to lose feeling in my left leg. I had a lot of internal injuries. My right ankle was as well. And I didn't have health insurance, so I wasn't given a painkiller or Tylenol. They knew I needed surgery. I was just strapped to a board and left there screaming for hours sometimes. Other times, nurses would come.
Thank you. We should have it up on our website within the next couple of days. So you can come back and watch it again.
Diane,
Yes?
sometimes it's the same day. I have checked YouTube and the speaker was there almost few minutes after the talk.
Well, our regular Zoom person, Vicky, was not able to do it today.
Yeah. Okay.
We borrowed a link from the Church of the Spirit. Actually, we're coming to you through the Church of the Spirit today. So I'm doing it, and it's the first time I've done it. So I should have it download when it's